We are headed for a record 30 minutes until the start of trading. I'm Matt Miller.
And I'm Katie Greifeld. Bloomberg Open Interest starts right now.
Coming up, President Trump prepares to deliver remarks from NATO this hour and reiterates his claim of complete and total destruction of Iranian nuclear sites. Meanwhile, on Capitol Hill, investors await a second day of testimony from Fed Chair Jay Powell. Treasury yields fell as he spoke yesterday, and the Nasdaq 100 set to extend its record-setting rally. We may get a record on the S&P today as well as we await Micron earnings after the bell. Katie, what are you watching?
Let's talk about what we saw on the earnings front yesterday afternoon, because FedEx shares down mightily right now after it said that profit will be worse than expected this quarter due to the impact of President Trump's trade war. The firm also noted the huge plunge in U.S.-China shipments last month. It also declined to provide a full-year guidance look. You can see shares down about 5% at the moment.
All right, I'm also watching General Mills. It is also out with a forecast that disappointed the street as Americans limit grocery spending on their cereal products. You can see the stock is down 3.3%. Katie?
All right, we'll tackle the earnings front, but let's talk politics, because while trying to strike deals with NATO countries in the Netherlands, President Trump is disputing a leaked U.S. intelligence report. The president has repeated that the nuclear sites were, quote, obliterated last weekend, while an early assessment from the Pentagon's Defense Intelligence Agency said that the bombing likely didn't cripple the core components of Iran's program.
They said it was actually, the report said it could have been they don't know. I mean, they did a report. I could have Pete talk to it because his department did the report. They really don't know. I think Israel's going to be telling us very soon, because Bibi is going to have people involved in that whole situation. We hear it was obliteration. It was a virtual obliteration.
Joining us for more on the Iran assessment of virtual obliteration and NATO Summit is Bloomberg political correspondent Tyler Kendall. She is in Washington, D.C. So, Tyler, I guess the most interesting thing here is that President Trump is contradicting his own Pentagon report. Why?
Yeah. Hey, Matt. Well, it does seem like President Trump is trying to put forward that there was more substantial damage. And we should say, you showed the headline at the top there, that Bloomberg News had confirmed earlier reporting that a preliminary intelligence assessment shows us that the U.S. airstrikes had a limited impact. That's according to people familiar with the matter. Sources say it likely set the program back several months to a year. But the White House has really rejected this assessment. And the other side of it is that analysts tell us that it is going to take a longer time to get a more firmer assessment of the damage that did happen. We heard from President Trump also at the NATO summit suggesting that perhaps the Israelis could come forth with a more firm assessment about the complete destruction at those sites. And I would also point out that we did have retired General Frank McKenzie on Balance of Power last night. He's the former commander of U.S. Central Command, and he said that he would put some caution in preliminary reports because it does take some extra time. One of the big questions here that's also going to take time is that there is still a big question about where the stockpile of enriched uranium currently is. We had heard from the Vice President J.D. Vance, who suggested that perhaps it was buried in these strikes. But the IAEA has said that their inspectors at the moment haven't been able to get in to locate it.
Yeah, it's interesting. The AP also reported that Iran, for their part, said that their nuclear installations were badly damaged by the U.S., but that might be some maneuvering on their part. Let's talk a little bit about NATO and what President Trump is doing in the Netherlands, because it certainly seems like a victory lap moment, especially when it comes to defense spending.
Definitely, Katie. I mean, President Trump really does view this as a win for him, considering he has called for NATO allies for so long to boost their defense spending up to that 5% GDP target. And we should say we've actually heard him use this rhetoric, particularly when it comes to trade deals, too. Often when he's talking about striking deals with the European Union and those member nations, he brings up his qualms when it comes to their defense spending. And it's also interesting, though, because President Trump's sort of walking the line here, though, when it comes to him being happy with them boosting their defense target, but not totally in support of Article 5, which would mandate that any of these nations would come and defend each other if under attack. President Trump, on his way over to the summit, said that there's multiple definitions of what Article 5 would really look like. Now, another thread that, of course, we're watching here is that we are expecting President Trump to meet shortly with Ukraine's President Zelensky. He does say that he has been in touch with him, but the other side of this is that we've heard many times from President Trump in recent days that he's also been in touch with Russian President Vladimir Putin.
All right, so a lot of conflict, a lot of geopolitical issues to deal with. What about trade? Tyler, do we expect any announcement from President Trump on tariff deals?
So at the moment, it's unclear if we're going to get something at this summit. I will say that I did ask NEC Director Kevin Hassett earlier this week at the White House when we can expect the next trade deal, and he told me likely after he sees the Senate get done with the reconciliation package. And that does track with what we also heard from Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent yesterday on Capitol Hill, who's essentially said that they're falling into a timeline here. They are, in their view, they've resolved the conflict in the Middle East. Next, they have to hit that July 4th target for the tax package, and then they will see the trade deals start to emerge. Now, of course, there is that July 9th deadline that really is looming, but the Treasury Secretary has previously said that it is highly likely they could extend it if they start to see some serious movement on any of them. Matt and Katie, I'd point you to the fact that yesterday we heard from the EU about how they are preparing retaliatory tariffs if there isn't some sort of progress here. They did say that they have made some, but at this point it might be all relative, considering that the Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick has previously indicated that the EU and these European nations might be last in line for a deal.
All right, Tyler, great update as always. That is Bloomberg's Tyler Kendall joining us with the latest from Washington. Let's turn to earnings now, because FedEx under pressure in a big way as tariffs eat into profits. The company withheld its yearly forecast when it reported earnings last night, with the trade war creating, quote, an uncertain global demand environment. Joining us now to discuss is TD Cowen analyst Jason Seidl. He has a buy rating on the stock with a $269 price target. Jason, great to have you with us. You take a look at the details of this report. You consider the fact that they're withholding guidance. It doesn't look great, and you're seeing that reflected in the stock price right now. You're sticking by that buy rating that you have. Tell us why.
Yeah, well, look, I think there's a few reasons why. When you look at what FedEx has been doing over these last couple of years, whether it's their drive program to sort of generically take out a lot of costs in their network, or the Network 2.0 plans that they have to combine both ground and express, we really think they're setting themselves up to really lift their margins once the business levels come back, especially in the B2B and industrial sectors. So we just think that in the out years, FedEx is going to look a lot stronger in terms of their earnings power. Plus, you have the freight spinoff that's coming sometime in the middle of next year. We think that could create some value. You also have to remember that because of this spin, what they're doing now is incurring a lot of upfront cost, particularly on the sales side, by ramping up that individual LTL salesperson spend.
Jason, I wonder if we're backing away from globalization, if we're looking at deglobalization, right? We stop buying goods from overseas and start making them more at home. How is FedEx a winner in that scenario, which is going to stick, right, for at least 3 more years?
Well, I think when you look at the domestic marketplace, I mean, that will really help their domestic volumes, because anything that's manufactured domestically tends to have more of a multiplier effect on the transport side. So it'll probably really help their freight business out the most, followed by their U.S. Parcel business. But right now, what we're seeing is really pressure on that trans-Pacific trade, which for them right now is one of their more profitable lanes. You saw growth in the month of March, you saw growth in the month of April, although less, and then you saw a fall off in the month of May. And that's going to hurt their earnings in the near term, and that's why we cut some of the numbers for the out quarters, despite them not providing guidance. We chose to be a little more conservative.
And so when it comes to FedEx, you think about some of the issues that they're facing. I mean, this seems like an industry-wide pressure when you think about some of the forces that Matt just mentioned, deglobalization and the like. How much of this is idiosyncratic to FedEx versus something that all of its competitors are dealing with as well?
I think this is something that you're going to see across the board. We've done a bunch of channel checks throughout the supply chain for providers, and it's sluggish out there, particularly on the trucking sector. When you look at the international container volumes, there's been there's had that air pocket. Now things are coming back. But, we hosted a call with the head of the Port of LA recently, and he was telling us that, for the peak season, that's more of the trucking and rail peak season, not the parcel, that orders looked a little bit down year over year when you look out to the fall. So I think it's sluggish right now. I think this affects everyone. I like the fact that FedEx has trimmed down their network and sort of, preparing for some of this. And I like some of the things that they're doing in terms of a spin. So, we're sticking with the stock. It's probably going to get a little ugly today. We think that's going to present a buying opportunity for longer-term shareholders.
All right, Jason, really appreciate your time today. Jason Seidl there of TD Cowen talking FedEx, and shout out to the Orange Men of Syracuse as well. Some more movers on our radar this morning. Micron reports after the bell. Those shares have doubled since April. They're down about 1.3% right now, but it's really kind of a guppy in the sea of chip makers, right? It's worth $150 billion, which used to be a hell of a lot in terms of market cap.
Yeah, good context there. It might be a guppy now, but it would like to be a big fish. So we'll see its progress report after the bell today. Loop Capital also raising their NVIDIA price target to a street high and predicting its market cap could reach $6 trillion. That's your big fish right there.
$6 trillion. That is absolutely nuts. Coinbase, you can see gaining 5% here as well. Bernstein upgrading that stock on hopes revenue at Coinbase will double by 2027.
Now coming up, Hims & Hers Health CEO, he's not backing down after Novo Nordisk ended the partnership between the two companies earlier this week. We'll take a look at that brewing battle up next. This is Open Interest.
Let's get to high interest now. Look at what's making headlines around the world. A shocking upset in the Democratic primary for New York City Mayor. Zoran Mamdani is poised to win the Democratic nomination after a commanding win in the first round of voting. The Queens lawmaker ran on a platform of freezing rents and free public bus rides. His rival, former Governor Andrew Cuomo, has conceded. And just a disclaimer, Michael Bloomberg, the founder and majority owner of Bloomberg LP, the parent company of Bloomberg TV, did endorse Cuomo. Now, Bumble shares soaring in the pre-market after announcing it's cutting its global workforce by about 240 roles. That's 30% of the company. Bumble also boosted its guidance for the second quarter, and as a result, you can see a 15% gain here in the pre-market. Hims & Hers is standing firm after Novo Nordisk abruptly ended its distribution partnership over what it calls deceptive marketing. In his first interview since the breakup, Hims CEO Andrew Dudum says they won't back down from offering cheap weight loss shots. The shares are up, but they had their worst single-day drop earlier this week on news of that breakup. Katie?
Yeah, specifically about 35%, I believe, in a single day. So for more on Hims pushing back on Novo, Sam Fazeli of Bloomberg Intelligence joins us now. And Sam, this is the quote that the CEO gave to our Madison Mueller, saying, "There's just no way in hell we're going to cave on that, no matter who the pharma company is or what the partnership looks like." I mean, Sam, I'm curious to hear your perspective on the fact that, I mean, Hims & Hers is trying to stand firm here and trying to continue to sell these cheaper weight loss shots.
Yeah, so obviously that's the kind of surprise or not, maybe. I mean, this is a cutthroat business. There's a lot of money at stake, a lot of money that people can make from obesity drugs. And I have to be honest, when Novo first announced this partnership, if you want, I was a little bit surprised. I think the market was generally a little bit surprised. And I think Novo was under pressure to get, or continues to be under pressure, to perform better commercially. Lilly has got what looks like a better product, Zepbound, in terms of the data that they've presented. So, you know, they were trying all kinds of avenues, and this was one of them. And it sounds like that the two have not been able to meet eye to eye in terms of how to conduct this partnership. And what's surprising is that Hims, despite the fact that the FDA has said you cannot compound anymore, has found a way to continue to do this. A possible loophole is the best I could put it. So, and don't forget, just to wrap this up in the first comment, is that we do have a situation where that deal was done under the previous or the CEO that they had. There's no CEO yet, but maybe there's some elements of that also played in, and the company decided to change tact.
Sam, what are the deceptive marketing claims? I note that Hims and Hers also sells medicine to regrow our hair. Will it actually work?
Yeah, but look, Matt, if you and I really believed that, we wouldn't be sitting here looking like this, right?
You guys look great, by the way.
Thank you. My wife thinks so too. But in any case, I think the issue is that it's easy to use words like this, deceptive marketing claims. Maybe Novo is referring to the fact that the company is using that what seems to be a loophole in the FDA rules against compounding. And it's possible that they're going out there saying things that Novo believes are not correct, which is like, we have fractional dosing, we have different ways that you can get access to our products. Maybe they have methods of helping people, walking people, hand-holding individuals. I don't know exactly. I've never really looked in too much depth as to exactly what Hims is doing. But then, so those are the sorts of things that I think could be happening. And I think this is a breakup, and breakups are never that pretty.
That's
they say
true.
baldness can be optional, Katie.
Really? On Hims and
So
Hers?
I could choose, me and Sam could choose, if our wives didn't love the way we looked, which is what they say, right? But we don't.
They're
know what they're really
contractually
thinking.
obligated to find you handsome. But anyway, Sam, I want to talk a little bit about what this means for Novo Nordisk. We were talking about the big drop that we saw from Hims earlier in the week. You also saw Novo shares fall, since this partnership was one of the ways that they plan to reestablish themselves in the U.S. market, try to take back some of that market share from Eli Lilly. I mean, where do they go from here?
Yeah, so Novo's bigger issue, if you like, for want of a better phrase, is to catch up with Lilly on its pipeline. Now, Lilly has got a whole variety of drugs in development. We've just seen data at the American Diabetes Association conference on their oral product and some of their amylin equivalent. These are the newer products that are coming along. And Lilly looks in a very strong position. And in fact, my colleague, Michael Shah, who was there, kind of gave them the conference, although he agreed, of course, that Novo had a significant presence too. But they have a lot of catch up to do. There's a lot of work for Novo to do on these novel combinations, etc. And that's where the focal point is at the minute, I think. I think for them to compete, they need to get this broad menu of products coming along going forward.
Absolutely, Sam. Great to get some time with you. That is Sam Fazeli of Bloomberg Intelligence. I do want to meditate a little bit on the divergence that we're seeing between Novo Nordisk and Eli Lilly. If you take a look, I have a 3-year chart pulled up right now. There's the 5 years. You can see really they were trading kind of on top of each other. Then fortunes started to change. Eli Lilly remaining resilient, and Novo Nordisk really falling from its highs. That's ultimately why we saw the company oust its CEO, Lars Frogard Jorgensen. But I like to focus on these kind of duopolies. You think about Uber, Lyft, you think about Airbus and Boeing. There's another example.
Well, I mean, I'm sure a lot of drug makers are hoping this doesn't stay a duopoly, right? So drug makers like Pfizer looking to get it in the game as well. It's going to be the pill that really proves the winner here, because I think aside from the early adopters, not everybody wants to inject himself or herself once a week.
Not investment advice, but an interesting perspective from our own Matt Miller.
No, never. Coming up, is tariff fear actually priced into this market? It sure doesn't feel like it as we approach a record high on the S&P 500. We hit one on the Nasdaq 100 yesterday. The chief strategist at UBS, Bonabueja, says nope. We'll ask Robinhood Stephanie Guild next. This is Open Interest.
At this point, tariff fear is back at zero. And on July 9th, we may get tariffs going up, going down, we don't know. But at this minute, what we do know is that tariff fear is completely priced out. So given that this market has already climbed significantly high walls of worry, given where we are going with tariffs on July 9th, we think it is, the caution is what is warranted right now. So At this minute, we won't be chasing the markets higher.
And that was the chief strategist over at UBS warning about complacency in markets when it comes to that coming tariff deadline. So let's discuss now with Robinhood Chief Investment Officer Stephanie Guild. Steph, it's great to see you in person.
Thank you.
So it feels like we might have forgotten about July 9th. Of course, that tariff deadline coming up. We also have that self-imposed July 4th deadline to get the big, beautiful bill across. And you add it all together.
August 12th, too, China.
There you go. So you put that all together, and against that backdrop, you could make the case that, okay, maybe a new record high in the Nasdaq 100 could look a little bit complacent.
I just think the whips, I've said this before, but I'm like the whipsaw factor is high and the market has a lot of hope and it will continue to have that. I think the market is assuming that tariffs will come in around that 10% mark on average and that the economy and companies can bear it. And I don't know if you saw some of the data that recently came out showing how companies just immediately, like 75% of companies just immediately increase their prices. Some are partially in terms of the tariffs that did come through. So I think what company investors are assuming is that everything's going to end up being okay and they can look past it, just like what happened over the weekend is being looked past too.
Do you feel like a lot of the things we were worried about at the start of Trump 47 are turning out to be okay? Like, it does look like companies aren't passing on so much in terms of cost to consumers.
I don't know. I think the jury's still out on that. So that's why I sort of agree with Powell, is what I should say, because I think he's waiting to see, is it really true that it's going to be okay or not? And we don't know what the answer is. My target on the S&P is 6,200. We're not that far away from that. Whoa. So I do think like valuations are not leaving very much room for error, and earnings expectations are already 9%.
Right.
So I'm not sure that we can go much higher from here, but
all
for
right,
different
Steph,
reasons.
we are just getting started.
Yeah.
We're back with the opening bell in just a few minutes. This is Bloomberg.
You could potentially see a brand new all-time record high for the S&P in the next few seconds. We're moments away from the start of trading. This is Bloomberg Open Interest. In the pre-market, we're looking at a gain of 0.2% on the S&P 500, 0.4%, double that, more than on the Nasdaq 100, which itself hit a record high yesterday. So this market really wants to rally. You hear the opening bell on the New York Stock Exchange. You're going to see Jose Batista Sobrino, the billionaire owner of JBS, a meat processing company out of Brazil. So that's delicious at 9:30 in the morning. And then Crane shares, and check out, they have a little humanoid robot here. The idea is they have this ETF, KOID, COID, and Benzinga says it's your entry to the $5 trillion humanoid robot market. But it's only been trading for a few days now. So.
Yeah, there you go. And thematic ETFs, they've had a pretty rough couple of years as of late, but we'll see how COID fares. Let's talk about FedEx, though, down 5% at the bell. They reported earnings last night. They said that profit will be worse than expected this quarter due to the impact of President Trump's trade war. The firm also noted that huge plunge in U.S.-China shipments last month, also declined to give full-year guidance. You add it all together, shares taking a leg lower this morning, Matt Miller.
All right, so those shares are down. Shares in General Mills are also off after the cereal maker came out with a disappointing forecast. North Americans aren't spending as much on Cheerios as analysts would like, and as a result, the shares down only 0.5% in the pre-market, but it's a big $30 billion company, so we thought we'd bring you that news. Goldman Sachs is warning that risks are mounting for low-quality stocks that have been riding this market rally higher. Look at the non-profitable tech basket versus the S&P 500 here. Senior trader Lewis Miller says these low-quality stocks are being driven higher by short sellers covering their positions rather than by positive corporate fundamentals, and higher inflation readings could be a turning point. We're back with Robinhood Chief Investment Officer Stephanie Guild, and I guess, you know, the rising tide lifts all boats, even the bad ones. Do you think that sets us up for another leg lower?
It's always possible, right? Like, we definitely believe in investing in companies that have profitability. That's kind of the core of our Robinhood Strategies portfolios. And I think some things have been helped more recently. I mean, the rallies, I feel like it's only been a couple days of a rally, but rates are lower. So if you're thinking about rates being lower because inflation expectations have come down again, the Fed cutting has started to creep in to be a little bit sooner. I think all those things help low quality stocks. Small caps on average tend to have 30% of their debt that's floating rate. So they really do need rates to come down to look higher quality. And you've seen small caps rally in the last couple of days, but they're still down for the year.
Yeah, absolutely. I track the Russell 2000 with some intensity, but when it comes to what you're seeing on Robinhood's platform, I could ask this about a different class of stocks. You think about what's going on in small caps, low quality stocks. You also think about what's going on in energy equities, also seeing a lot of interest lately. Are folks actually chasing those rallies?
We haven't seen people chasing the energy stocks. It's something you look at it and you say, oh gosh, should I be jumping in here? But I really do think it was short-lived. That being said, power needs for AI and for you seeing it all the time, like that is something where you're seeing a huge amount of CapEx go into, and power companies and maybe even energy companies should benefit from that. So that's a different reason, and may not necessarily be chasing it a little more like secular in nature.
The big hyperscalers need that power. They keep making deals with nuclear power producers. Yeah. What about the hyperscalers themselves? I mean, the Magnificent Eight. I'll say that for Katie because she wants Broadcom to be included.
Avcom. I don't want it necessarily. I'm just saying it's an interesting discussion to have.
They have to change their ticker first.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to buy Avgo. No,
right.
Obviously it's huge. Everyone has been buying Avgo. So do you think that continues?
I think size helps you no matter what. And they are certainly at the forefront. You are hearing about in certain companies like Meta going out and just giving people crazy bonuses to join the team to focus on artificial intelligence and how to actually make it come into all parts of our lives. I think over time, these companies could end up winning because I do think AI is, one, disinflationary, brought like longer term, and I think it's definitely going to be part of I see it, I don't know if you all feel it, but I feel it personally. Yeah. And so I do think it's something that we're going to not stop seeing. I think we're out of the chip makers being the only way to play it. That's and I think our customer base is seeing that too. And they're not afraid of taking bets in other things like quantum computing, which we've seen.
Yeah, absolutely. There's some ETFs that track quantum computing that have just been absolutely skyrocketing. But it does feel like Meta, for example, when it comes to investment playbooks moving outside just the chips. That definitely is a name that comes to mind. But you mentioned inflation, so let's talk a little bit about the Fed. It's been interesting to listen to Jerome Powell over the past 24 hours, pushing back on some of his FOMC members, maybe saying that July is in play. How much does it actually matter, whether we get the next rate cut in July or in September, or maybe not even until 2026?
I think it matters if we get it this year versus next year. I do think the Fed is they're being rightfully patient, in my opinion, for just a little bit longer. I think the two Fed governors who are really into, being a little more dovish might have some ulterior motives, to be honest.
Perhaps a little bit political?
A little bit just, seeing things that others are, because if you saw in the last economic projections, I think the number of governors who wanted to actually hold went from 4 to 7. So I think there are more governors that believe that we should hold on, and the economy can take it for now. We have to see what happens with the labor market, to me in particular.
I have not found it interesting to listen to Jerome Powell at all.
He's so steadfast.
It's more interesting to listen to the crazy Congress people, right? I mean, they lead this country. It's nuts.
Well, that's exactly how he wants it. He's trying not to be interesting.
Well, yeah, they make him boring.
He's just being steadfast.
Stephanie, you like Circle here. This is a company, the stablecoin, I guess, issuer, thank you, that is worth 7 times what it sold for in the IPO. What is going on there? Is it just a small float? Is it impossible to get short? Do you think this company really is worth 7 times more than investors paid for it 2.5 weeks ago?
So we don't personally own it in our portfolios, but it's definitely a company that has gotten a lot of at right place, right time. For sure. From a regulatory perspective, you said from the float, it's the shorting, and it's a company that is just involved in something that I think is the future of finance. It's just going to take probably a little longer to actually be core to finance. So sure, in all these kinds of things, can valuations get ahead of themselves in the short term? I think so. But in the long term, I also believe that stablecoin and digital currencies will be a innate part of financial services.
I'm really interested to see how this develops on the ETF front, not to, be a hammer that's only looking for nails, but you saw so many issuers come out with single stock ETF filings of Circle. They'd probably use derivatives to get that exposure, and I'm really interested to see if traders short those ETFs if they can't get a hold of Circle, but that's really speculative, so we'll have to see how that one develops.
Are there not inverse ETFs?
Not yet.
For Circle?
The thing just went public, so you
Yeah.
have to file for an ETF, and then the SEC has to give its green light. There is some regulatory
It takes
process.
time, yeah.
I'm interested in COID.
The little robot?
The humanoid robot ETF.
Yeah, we'll see.
You see the one that has like jet powered now?
Oh.
There's like there's one they just created that was like able to have
Crane
lift off.
shares? Or
No,
No,
the
just like a
robot.
general company, was able to make a robot that jets.
I try not.
That's the one I want.
I try not to think about robots too much. I could get existentially worried. Steph, great to see you. That is Stephanie Guild of Robinhood. Let's get a check on this market right now, and that rally underway in the S&P 500, up about 0.2%. Today could be the day where we get a fresh record high on the S&P 500. But here's a worrying sign. Breath not too great at this moment. You have 138 names in the green. You have more decliners, over 350 decliners right now. You take a look at what is holding up this market. It's the stocks that you would want to see: NVIDIA, Apple, Alphabet, Microsoft, Broadcom, Avgo. Matt loves it. Really putting in the work here. But then you take a look at the downside. A big weight in the likes of Tesla, off of only about 1%, but it's such a big company that is your biggest points contributor to the downside. You also have United Health and Paychex, Berkshire Hathaway down too. Let's take a look at how this shakes out on the sector level right now, and it's a similar story. Bad breath up at the top. Infotech holding up this market. Communication services and discretionary a little bit as well. Definitely more red today. Financials there. You go down to the bottom. Energy, utilities, and real estate off about 1.3%, Matt Miller.
I'm looking at Iron Cub 3, which is apparently the world's first jet-powered humanoid robot.
I did not know that.
I didn't either, but now this is the one I want. Coming up, Micron among the stocks that helped push the Nasdaq 100 to all-time highs. We'll discuss that company's earnings and this big tech rally next. This is Open Interest.
Welcome back to Open Interest. It's time now for our top calls. Some of the analyst action in focus this morning. And first up, Stellantis climbing on an upgrade over from Jefferies. The analyst saying most of its challenges are, quote, self-inflicted and fixable. Some harsh words, but the shares are up almost 5%, so that's good news. Next up, Bernstein raising its price target on Coinbase to a street high of $510, expecting annual revenue to more than double by 2027. Shares currently up also almost 5% if you round up. And finally, we end with Loop Capital raising their NVIDIA price target to a street high of $250 a share. The analyst over there predicts that its market cap could eventually reach $6 trillion due to relentless demand for its AI products. Shares currently trading about $100 below that. Now, we're talking about NVIDIA. Let's talk about Micron, because that's the next major AI player to report earnings after the bell today. Shares have roughly doubled since April, with the options market today pricing in an 8% move for Micron after the report. Now, Micron stock has helped to push the Nasdaq 100 to all-time highs as big tech really drives the current market rally forward, and that certainly is the mood today, Matt.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about what to expect from Micron with Bloomberg Intelligence analyst Jake Silverman. He joins us here on set, and Bloomberg Tech co-host Ed Ludlow in San Francisco. Jake, I'll start with you. This is a company that has had its ups and downs. I was telling you during the break, I covered this when I started working here in the year 2000, and it's only risen 46% since then, but it's doubled since April. What's driving that?
Yeah, a lot of that really is just based on pricing strength that we've seen over the last couple of months. I mean, again, you have to keep in context that in April we were seeing potential threats from trade-related, tariffs, stuff like that. So there's definitely, some expected improvement in terms of supply and demand balance.
Let's bring Ed Ludlow into this conversation and let's compare and contrast here, because we're talking about Micron and it's had a fantastic run over the past couple months, Ed, but it just feels like everything is table stakes compared to NVIDIA. That is the benchmark against which all chip makers are judged.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, since the April low, AI is still the primary growth narrative, right, for the technology sector. But I think we talked about this on the program. The idea is that investors are kind of rummaging a little bit deeper into the server design, looking beyond NVIDIA and looking, okay, around the GPU, what else is in there? And Micron and its high bandwidth memory is a big part of that. Jake raises a really interesting point that there is a scarcity value to what Micron does. You know, ultra high demand for high bandwidth memory, and you have to assess how much of a bottleneck that is for people building out infrastructure. Because when NVIDIA comes around with earnings, expectations are super high, but we always ask the question, is there a supply constraint here? In other words, could you have more of these GPUs from TSMC to meet demand that you're not currently meeting? And Micron, there is some analogous comparison there as well.
Ed, you taught me all about high bandwidth memory, so I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Good reason to watch Bloomberg Tech. It's not all about DRAM for this company anymore. Are they the only ones? You know, because NVIDIA likes to paint itself as the only one or the best of the GPU makers. Is Micron the best of the HBM makers?
No, not necessarily. There are essentially three players, which are Micron, SK Hynix, and Samsung. And actually, we're still quite early in this phase where the highest performance GPU makers or chip designers like NVIDIA, and those that design, build, and operate data centers are still validating and qualifying which works best. But Micron is clearly able to capture some of that market, particularly domestic market in the United States, because remember, in parallel to the sort of basic bottleneck of limited supply is the political effort to onshore manufacturing and build out capacity. Think of high bandwidth memory as just many little DRAMs squished together with wires running through them. That's basically the reality of it. The problem that Micron's got is that building that capacity is super expensive, and you had the headlines in the last month about their upped commitment to the United States of America. Jake and I were actually debating offline at that time, like, is this real? They just seem to be making numbers up to a certain extent. But they also still have that legacy NAND and DRAM business that is more cyclical. It's more commoditized, and they have to balance that as well. So watch margins a little bit when we get the numbers this evening.
Right, that's exactly where I wanted to go, Jake. I mean, Ed makes a great point when it comes to how expensive some of this is. And you think about margins, they were actually a little bit disappointing in the second quarter. You think about this fantastic run that Micron has had. When it comes to margins and you think about the stock performance, could it be a victim of its own success? How high are the stakes right now?
Yeah, well, margins are very important. They're a pretty important driver in terms of their valuation, but also obviously in terms of generating free cash flow. So I think one of the reasons that we were seeing some margin compression was because of NAND weakness in the business. But overall, if NAND is able to recover, if we're able to see solid supply and demand balance, and also if we see more and more HBM demand, which all the signals are pointing towards yes, as supply continues to increase and as they're able to improve yields, all of those are potential signals that margins could expand beyond what we're seeing now. And people are, of course, going to take a look at how are margins able to grow in the last cycle and compare the potential growth or margin expansion in the current cycle.
All right, Jake, great to get a primer from you. And Ed, Jake Silverman of Bloomberg Intelligence, Ed Ludlow there of Bloomberg Tech. His program starts in an hour and 10 minutes. Could be preempted by either Jay Powell giving testimony today on Capitol Hill or President Trump. He is set to speak at the NATO Summit this hour, but everything there seems to be being shifted later and later. We'll bring you the president's remarks as soon as he begins speaking. This is Open Interest. This is Bloomberg Open Interest. I'm Matt Miller. Let's get a quick check on what stocks are doing. So close to a record high for the S&P 500. You can see we're at 6,100 right now. So we just have basically 45, 46 points to go until we hit that closing all-time record from, I believe, February 19th. The Nasdaq hit a record yesterday and continues to climb even higher. The Nasdaq 100, I should say, at 22,273. In terms of the movers today, the big one is Nvidia, and it's up 2%. So for a $3 trillion plus company, that makes a big difference. Micron is down, but it's only worth $140 billion, so small in comparison. Stellantis moving up, Tesla moving down, Bumble cutting a lot of workers, and you can see Meta, Facebook unchanged there. But I guess the real deal right now, Katie, is we're waiting to hear from President Trump at NATO.
Absolutely. President Trump about to speak any minute from the NATO summit in the Netherlands. Back home, the president is facing a self-imposed July 4th deadline to pass his tax and spending bill, and he's 2 weeks out from the July 9th expiration of that global tariff pause. On all of this, let's bring in Bloomberg Washington correspondent Tyler Kendall. Let's start.
Look at the big man walking out to the podium there.
There we go. Yeah, due to start speaking any second. Tyler, just give us a drumbeat, what we've accomplished at NATO. We know that NATO leaders did back that plan to raise defense spending.
Yeah, hey, Katie. Well, President Trump really is billing this as a big success in his own words, since they did pledge to boost defense spending to 5% of GDP. That is 3.5% in core defense and then 1.5% in other sorts of investments, such as infrastructure or cybersecurity. And I'd point you to the fact that our analysts at Bloomberg Economics have actually crunched the numbers, and they say that the estimated borrowing by these economies to reach this spending limit would add about $4.6 trillion to debt piles over the next 10 years. Now, President Trump got this win when it comes to having our allies boost their defense spending. And what NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte got was a firmer commitment to Article 5 when it comes to these NATO allies and their pledge to defend each other if they were attacked. Now, on the way over, President Trump had said, as he was getting into Marine One, that there were different sort of definitions when it comes to Article 5, though he did say to leaders here at the summit that he does stand firmly behind it.
We're just getting headlines that President Zelensky had a long and productive meeting with President Trump. And I guess as we're all focused so much on Israel and Iran, the Ukraine issues have not fallen on the back burner, but it just hasn't been in the news cycle. How does that look set to work out in terms of President Trump's support of Ukraine?
Well, actually, much to your point, Matt, a person familiar who was in the room with President Trump and other NATO allies said that he told leaders that the situation in Ukraine has, quote, gotten totally out of control. So it is clear that this White House does want to see some sort of progress, some sort of movement when it does come to that conflict, considering that President Trump has previously pledged that he would be able to get them to come to some sort of resolution. We know that the president has spoken with Russian President Vladimir Putin in recent days, who offered to mediate the conflict when it did come to Israel and Iran. And he said openly that he told the Russian president that he should focus on mediating his own conflict first before getting into any other issues.
All right, Tyler, thanks very much. Tyler Kendall there in Washington. I guess I didn't see the really big one walking out too. But we are waiting for President Trump to walk out to that podium any minute now. And as soon as he begins speaking, we will bring you those remarks at the NATO summit. Also, Fed Chair Jay Powell is back on Capitol Hill, this time testifying before the Senate Banking Committee. They will be getting set up there right now. You heard his opening remarks yesterday because he delivers essentially the same speech to Congress that he does to the Senate.
But the questions will be different.
Sometimes you could argue
spiritually similar,
of higher quality, though, out of the Senate. Plus, we're going to speak with Goldman Sachs Chief U.S. Equity Strategist David Kostin after the break. This is Open Interest.
But I want to thank you for joining us at the conclusion of a highly productive NATO summit in the Netherlands. I want to thank them for the royal treatment they've given us. Couldn't have been nicer. And it's a beautiful country, really a beautiful country. Coming in, I saw the most beautiful trees. In fact, I want to bring some back with me. I want to also thank, I had breakfast this morning with the King and Queen, and they're incredible people. I said, your central casting, beautiful people, great people. big, beautiful heart. And I enjoyed that. And also NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, who's been terrific. He's been a friend of mine. He used to be right here running this wonderful country. Now he's the NATO Secretary General. He's doing a fantastic job. And the Prime Minister, we appreciate everything you've done. And as you know, last weekend, the United States successfully carried out a massive precision strike on Iran's nuclear enrichment facilities, and it was very, very successful. It was called obliteration. No other military on earth could have done it, and now this incredible exercise of American strength has paved the way for peace with a historic ceasefire agreement late Monday, and we call it the 12-day war. Spoke to a few people. I guess that just sounded like the right name. It was a 12-day war. And we think it's over. I don't think they're going to be going back at each other. I don't think so. Not only have we dealt decisively with the critical threat of Iran's nuclear program, which was what I wanted. I said, Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. I've said that for 15 years, long before I decided to do the political thing. But we've also reasserted the credibility of American deterrence, which is like no other. The people at NATO said there's never been anything. You know, I rebuilt the entire military during my first term. And we have a great military. We have great generals. Got to know the good ones and the bad ones. We kept the good ones. Over the past 2 days, I was honored to participate in the NATO leaders meeting and also had extremely good individual discussions with the King and the Queen, Secretary General Rutte, and the Prime Minister. Great discussions. Very knowledgeable people. Major focus of our conversations at the summit was the need for other NATO members to take up the burden of the defense of Europe, and that included the financial burden. As you know, it was 2%, and we got it up to 5%. And they said, a couple of them came up to me, one in particular said, "Sir, we've been trying to get it up to 3% for 20 years, and we haven't been able, and you got it up to 5%. So they're going to be, most of them, I guess almost all of them, are going to be contributing now 5%, a number that people are surprised at, but you need it today. The United States accounts for 2/3 of all NATO defense spending, and since I began pushing for additional commitments in 2017, believe it or not, our allies have increased spending by $700 billion. I said to people, you don't have any money, and a lot of them weren't paying. And so I started the process, and I picked it up as soon as I got back, which is 6 months ago. And following my election last November, almost all have accelerated plans to reach the 2%, 3%, 4%, and then ultimately, very quickly, 5%. And all of this is going to be done very quickly, almost immediately. You probably know this as well as I do. I'm sure they've been talking about it. It's really been a big focus. In a very historic milestone this week, the NATO allies committed to dramatically increase their defense spending to that 5% of GDP, something that no one really thought possible. And they said, "You did it, sir, you did it." Well, I don't know if I did it, but I think I did. This will be known as the Hague Defense Commitment, which is pretty good, pretty appropriate. When the allies reach this number, it will add more than $1 trillion a year. Think of that, $1 trillion per year to our common defense. And this is a monument really to victory, but it's a monumental win for the United States because we were carrying much more than our fair share. It was quite unfair, actually. But this is a big win for Europe and for actually Western civilization. For years, past administrations failed to get most allies to contribute even the 2%. I remember when I came here, we had 4 countries that were up to 2%. And I remember Poland was there. A couple of them were there. And but most of them were. We had 28 at the time. As you know, it's increased a little bit. And they've agreed now to more than double their budgets in all cases. And Europe stepping up to take more responsibility for its security will help prevent future disasters like the horrible situation with Russia and Ukraine, and hopefully we're going to get that solved. Last week they lost 7,000 soldiers, mostly soldiers, but they're also getting hit in Kiev. They're getting hit in some of the towns also. And that means life. Life is disappearing also in the cities and towns. Should have never happened, would have never happened if I was president. Said it 1,000 times. And it never did happen. It's never even thought about. But it's vital that this additional money be spent on very serious military hardware, not bureaucracy. And hopefully that hardware is going to be made in America because we have the best hardware in the world. You saw that where 14 missiles were shot at us the other day. And they were very nice. They gave us warning. They said, we're going to shoot them. Is 1 o'clock okay? They said, it's fine. And everybody was emptied off the base, so they couldn't get hurt except for the gunners. They call them the gunners. And out of 14 high-end missiles that were shot at the base in Qatar, all 14, as you know, were shot down by our equipment. Amazing stuff. Amazing that they can do. It's like shooting a bullet with a bullet. It's the same thing if you think about it. 14 out of 14, and they weren't even that surprised. I said, do you do that well often? They say, we pretty much do, sir. The Ukraine crisis has also highlighted the urgency of rebuilding our defense industrial base, both in the United States and among the allied nations. We cannot afford to be dependent on foreign adversaries for critical minerals. And as you know, we made a deal with Ukraine to take a vast amount of the land they have for minerals. We need it. And once again, I want to thank all of the people in the Netherlands, incredible people. It's a great place. And all of the NATO allies for the tremendous summit that we just had. A letter just came in, and a statement came in from the Atomic Energy Commission of Israel. And I just wondered, this is an official letter, and they're very serious people, as you know. The devastating U.S. strike on Fordo destroyed the site's critical infrastructure and rendered the enrichment facility totally inoperable. It was devastated. We assess that the American strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities has set back Iran's ability to develop nuclear weapons for many years to come. This achievement can continue indefinitely if Iran does not get access to nuclear material, which it won't. It's so sad that that whole thing had to go. But I just want to thank our pilots. You know, they were maligned and treated very bad, demeaned by fake news CNN, which is back there, believe it or not, wasting time, nobody's watching them. So they're just wasting a lot of time, wasting my time. And the New York Times, they put out a story that, well, maybe they were hit, but it wasn't bad. Well, it was so bad that they ended the war. It ended the war. Somebody said in a certain way, you know, that it was so devastating, actually. If you look at Hiroshima, if you look at Nagasaki, you know, that ended a war too. This ended a war in a different way, but it was so devastating. Also, they have, out of Dubai, just came that Iran's foreign ministry spokesman, this is Iran's foreign ministry, says its nuclear installations were very badly damaged by the American strike. So what bothered me about these reports were fake reports put out by the New York Times, I call it the failing New York Times because it's doing terribly. Without me, it would be doing no business at all. But, and by fake news, CNN and MSDNC, all of these terrible people, you know, they have no credibility. You know, when I started, they were at 94% credibility, the media. Now it's at 16%. And I'm very proud of it because I've exposed it for what it is. But when I saw them starting to question the caliber of the attack, was it bad? Well, it was really bad. It was devastating. They were obliterated. In fact, you can't get into the tunnels. They just put that over. That just came out. They can't. There's nothing. There's no way you can even get down. The whole thing is collapsed in a disaster. And I think all of the nuclear stuff is down there because it's very hard to remove. And we did it very quickly. When they heard we were coming, it was, you know, you can't move it. Very hard, very dangerous, actually, to move too. And they also knew we were coming, so I don't think too many people want to be down there knowing we're coming with the bunker busters, as we call them. We're the only ones that have them. We have the best equipment, best nuclear equipment, and we have the best equipment in the world. And by the way, We can't forget our submarine, which was out there, submarines actually, but submarine was out there. We shot 30 rockets into an area, every single one of them. I think it was almost 400 miles away, I think, Pete, right? 400 and long. It was in the ocean, long ways away. And we shot a total of 30. Every single one of them hit within 9 inches from where it was supposed to be. It took out a lot because we didn't do just 4, though. We did 2 others in addition, which hadn't been completely destroyed. So we hit them with a submarine from hundreds of miles away. Amazing, just amazing equipment. Greatest submarines in the world. Nobody's even close. They're 20 years behind us when it comes to submarine technology. So that's one, and the other was from the Atomic Energy Commission, and they have about 3 or 4 of them now coming in from atomic energy commissions from various places. But the one that we have that just came out, we released it a little while ago, was from the Israeli Atomic Energy Commission, but numerous of them are getting to see the site, and the site has been demolished. And again, we had these brave patriots, these incredible flyers, these people that can fly a plane better than anybody can fly a plane, going into very hostile territory, flying into the territory that has got more missiles and things pointed at it. But it was very stealth. They didn't get to see it. It was dark. That's the amazing thing about the shots. They hit the shots perfectly, and yet it was dead dark. There was no moon. There was no light. It was virtually moonless. It was very dark, and the shots were hit perfectly. But when they get demeaned, and they were very upset about it because they knew how strong it would be. Back in Missouri, the pilots flew about 36 hours, 2 ways, far distance, and in those incredible B-2s. And we then had the F-22s, and we had the F-35s, and we had other planes, and we had, I think, a total of 52 tankers. That means the big tankers, because the refueling was a lot for all of the different planes that we sent. Incredible operation, and I have to say, General Raisin Cain was incredible. That's why he beat ISIS, and we beat ISIS in a matter of weeks. I was told it would take 4 to 5 years. We did it in a few weeks. And he was great. That's why he's the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff right now, because I had a very good experience with him. He knocked out ISIS in a period of literally a few weeks. Amazing. And it was supposed to take a few years, 5 years to be exact. So we had a great victory there, and we then came here, and I think we had a great victory here. But this is an ongoing project. This is the safety of Europe, the safety of the world. And they've raised it from 2% to 5%, something which nobody, and you're talking about over $1 trillion a year. So we're talking about a lot of money coming in from countries that we're not paying nearly enough to be effective. So I have, as you know, Marco Rubio with me, and Pete Hegseth, Secretary of State and Secretary of War. Should we say Secretary? You know, it used to be called Secretary of War. Maybe for a couple of weeks we'll call it that, because we feel like warriors. Used to be called Secretary of War. In fact, if you look at the old building next to the White House, you can see where it used to be Secretary of War. Then we became politically correct, and they called it Secretary of Defense. I don't know, maybe we'll have to start thinking about changing it, but we feel that way. Do we have any questions, please? Wow. That's a lot of questions. Who's a nice person? Oh, you're not a nice person, but I'll let you ask one. Go ahead. What's he going to ask? He is not nice at all. I know him well.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Yeah.
Thank you for taking the time before flying home. You just said you believe the conflict between Israel and Iran is over. What makes you so confident it is? And what do you do if it isn't?
Because I dealt with both, and they're both tired, exhausted. They fought very, very hard and very viciously, very violently, and they were both satisfied to go home and get out. And can it start again? I guess someday it can. It could maybe start soon. I think a big telltale sign was when, as you know, Iran somewhat, by not much, violated the ceasefire and Israel had the planes going out that morning, and there were a lot of them, 52 of them. And I said, you got to get them back. And they brought them back. They didn't do anything. They brought them back. It was very good. I thought it was amazing, actually. They have fought a hell of a war. They fought very hard. I think the war ended, actually, when we hit the various nuclear sites with the planes. And I just hope you people can give these pilots, these are the best pilots in the world. They're the best shots in the world. They call them shots. That's what they are. And wait a minute. And I just hope you can give them the respect they deserve, because they came home to fake news. And like, oh, gee, there was hardly any damage. The things are decimated. So, but I think, no, I think they're very much finished. I think Israel's going to get back to doing what they do. And I think that Iran's going to get back. You know, Iran has a huge advantage. They have great oil, and they can do things. I don't see them getting back involved in the nuclear business anymore. I think they've had it. They've been at it for 20 years, and I don't see that happening either. Now, if it does, we're always there. It won't be me. It'll be somebody else, but we're there. We'll have to do something about it. Yes, please, go ahead. Go ahead. Oh, fake news, CNN? Oh, yeah, here we go. Wait till you hear this question.
Thank you, sir.
You should really say how great our soldiers and our warriors are.
I think everyone appreciates our soldiers and our warriors. I do have two questions for you, Mr. President. You just cited Israeli intelligence on these attacks. Earlier, you said U.S. intelligence was inconclusive. Are you relying on Israeli intelligence for your assessment of the impact of the strikes?
No, this is also, Iran made the statement, and it's also, if you read the document that was given, that Pete can talk about if you'd like, the document said it could be very severe damage. But they didn't take that. They said it could be limited or it could be very severe. They really didn't know, other than to say it could be limited or it could be very, very severe. And you didn't choose to put that because it was very early after. Since then, we've collected additional intelligence. We've also spoken to people who have seen the site, and the site is obliterated. And we think everything nuclear is down there. They didn't take it out. Okay, question? Please, go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah, blue dress.
Thank you so much, Mr. President. Yesterday, you said China can now continue to purchase oil from Iran.
Yeah.
Are you giving up on your maximum pressure campaign? Because there are sanctions right now.
With who?
On Iran.
No, look, they just had a war. The war was fought. They fought it bravely. I'm not giving up. They're in the oil business. I mean, I could stop it if I wanted. I could sell China the oil myself. I don't want to do that. They're going to need money to put that country back into shape. We want to see that happen. Would it? No. If they're going to sell oil, they're going to sell oil. We're not taking over the oil. We could have, you know. I used to say with Iraq, keep the oil. I could say it here, too. We could have kept the oil. No, China is going to want to buy oil. They can buy it from us. They can buy it from other people. But you're going to have to put that country back into shape. It desperately needs money. Yeah.
Mr. President.
Yeah, please. Here we go. I'm picking the beauties today. Go ahead.
Mr. President, Secretary General Rutte has described President Putin as an adversary, a threat, an enemy. Do you view him the same way? And in addition to that, you mentioned General Kane, your chief of staff, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
General Kane.
Yes. He has said that Mr. Putin has territorial ambitions beyond Ukraine. Do you view that in the same way?
Possible. President? I mean, it's possible. I know one thing. He'd like to settle. He'd like to get out of this thing. It's a mess for him. He called the other day. He said, can I help you with Iran? I said, no, you can help me with Russia. Because, you know, in the last few weeks, we took care of India and Pakistan, Kosovo, Serbia. I think on Friday we have coming in, the Congo is coming in, and Rwanda is coming in. That was a vicious war that went on, a machete war, heads chopped off all over Africa. They're coming in. We did 2 others in addition to that. Nobody's ever done anything like this. No, I consider him a person that's, I think, been misguided. I'm very surprised, actually. I thought we would have had that settled easy. I've settled 4 of them in the meantime. But he did call up, and he said, you know, he's close to Iran. He'd like to help us get a settlement. I said, no. you help me get a settlement with Russia? And I think we're going to be doing that too. Yeah, please. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. President. You've made clear your position on what impact the strikes had. I wanted to ask you what is next with Iran. For instance, is there any indication from U.S. intelligence that Iran was able to move any material, including
No, just the opposite. We think we hit them so hard and so fast they didn't get to move. And if you knew about that material, it's very hard and very dangerous to move. It's called in many people they call it dust, but it's very, very heavy. It's very, very hard to move. And they were way down. You know, they're 30 stories down. They're literally 30, 35 stories down underground.
I think you got it all.
Oh yeah, we think it's covered with granite, concrete, and steel.
Can I ask you, are you interested in restarting negotiations with Iran? And if so, have they reciprocated?
So
or is
our
this
people,
sort of a settled
Marco could answer this, but our people are not, I'm not. The way I look at it, they fought, the war's done, and, you know, I could get a statement that they're not going to go nuclear. We're probably going to ask for that, but they're not going to be doing it. But they're not going to be doing it anyway. They've had it. They've had it. Now, maybe someday in the future we'll want that. But I've asked Marco, do you want to draw, I just asked him the question as we were walking on the stage, do you want to draw up a little agreement for them to sign? Because I think we can get them to sign it. I don't think it's necessary. Marco, do you want to talk about that, please?
Mr. President, I think President Trump has shown a willingness to meet and talk to anybody in the world who's interested in peace. I don't know of any president that's been as willing as he has to meet with anyone and talk about peace. We'd love to have peaceful relations with any country in the world. And so obviously that'll depend on Iran's willingness not just to engage in peace, but to negotiate directly with the United States, not through some third country or fourth country process. But I know of no president, probably in our modern history, that's sought peace more than President Trump has.
Sounds like the door is open, but you're in no rush. Is that right? It sounds like the door is open, but
I'll tell you what, look, we're going to talk to them next week with Iran. We may sign an agreement. I don't know. To me, I don't think it's that necessary. I mean, they had a war, they fought. Now they're going back to their world. I don't care if I have an agreement or not. The only thing we'd be asking for is what we were asking for before about we want no nuclear, but we destroyed the nuclear. In other words, that's destroyed. I said, Iran will not have nuclear. Well, we blew it up. It's blown up to kingdom come. And so I don't feel very strongly about it. If we got a document, wouldn't be bad. We're going to meet with them, actually. We're going to meet with them. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Yes. Mr. President, Netherlands TV, thank you for visiting our country.
Good.
As I understood, I, of course, would like to know how you slept last night at the House of the King.
Oh, I slept beautifully.
But probably a more serious question. I think you just had a meeting with President Zelensky. Did you discuss any ceasefire in this Russo-Ukrainian war?
No, I wanted to know how he's doing. He was very nice, actually. You know, we had little rough times sometimes. He was couldn't have been nicer. I think he'd like to see an end to this. I do. I think what I took from the meeting couldn't have been nicer, actually. But I took from the meeting that he'd like to see it end. I think it's a great time to end it. I'm going to speak to Vladimir Putin, see if we can get it ended. But look, these are brave people. They're fighting these wars all over the place. You know, last week they had, I guess, I told you, close to 7,000 young soldiers, Russian and Ukrainian soldiers were killed, 7,000 in 1 week. It's crazy. It's crazy. So I'll be speaking to Putin. No, I had a good meeting with Zelensky. And I had a lot of good meetings. We had a lot of good meetings with a lot of people, a lot of great leaders. But he's fighting a brave battle. It's a tough battle. Yeah. Go ahead, white dress.
Thank you. Ida Hallikainen from Finland, Ilta-Sanomat. You have played golf with President Alexander Stubb. How do you see Finland as a NATO ally and partner, and how would you describe your relationship with our president?
Well, he's a very good golfer, okay? In fact, he was on his college golf team. He went to a good college in the South, as you know, a very good college, and he was a good golfer. We had a good time. I think my relationship's great. I want to buy icebreakers. You know, you're very good at icebreakers. And I actually made him an offer I didn't go to Congress. They'll try and impeach me for this. But there's an old, it's not old, it's fairly new, but it's used icebreaker. And I offered him about 1/3 of what he asked for. But we're negotiating. We need icebreakers in the U.S. And if we can get some inexpensively, I'd like to do that. Actually, they'll fix it up, make it good. Also, we may buy some icebreakers. You know, you're the king of icebreakers, that particular country. They make them good. They make them really good, and they know what they're doing. And so we're negotiating with them for about 15 different icebreakers. But one of them is available now. It's old, and it's, old. It's like 5-6 years old. And we're trying to buy it. I'm trying to make a good deal. It's all I do my whole life. My whole life, that's all I do is make deals. Yeah, please. Go ahead. Sir, go ahead.
Yeah, a question for NewsHour, Dutch TV. First of all, on Article 5, on your way here, you spoke about the commitment of the US to Article 5, saying, I'll give you my definition once we're here. What is your definition, and may the US commitment to Article 5 change in case some of the NATO members do not reach the threshold that was discussed today? My second question is following up on a colleague on Iran. What intel reports do say that everything over there was obliterated?
Yeah, well, there are numerous of those reports, and they're coming out fast and furious. But the most respected ones we've already seen. And I will say that on a very confidential basis, they're looking at the reports, like numerous reports, and including people going to the site and checking the site. And they're going to be having, I guess you're going to be having over the next couple of days you're going to encapsulate it. But no, the site was obliterated, just like I said it was. And just like the pilots should be given credit for. As far as Article 5, look, when I came here because it was something I'm supposed to be doing, but I left here a little bit differently. I said, I watched the heads of these countries get up, and the love and the passion that they showed for their country was unbelievable. I've never seen quite anything like it. They want to protect their country, and they need the United States. And without the United States, it's not going to be the same. And you can ask Mark, or you can ask any of the people that were there. It was really moving to see it. They love their country. They were so respectful of me because I'm the head of the United States. And I made, the King of Saudi Arabia, when I was in the Middle East. So I was in Qatar for a different reason, not a reason to get shot at. We were in there for economic development reasons, Qatar, UAE, and Saudi Arabia. All three leaders of those countries, and we took back $5.1 trillion into the United States. All three leaders said, you're presiding over the hottest country in the world. The United States right now is the hottest. Everybody wants to be there. Everybody wants a piece of it. He said, a year ago, your country was dead. You had a deadhead running it. You had a country that was dead, and it was dead. You had people pouring through the borders. You had inflation. You had everything. He said, you've made it in 5 months at that time. You've made it the hottest country. This is the hottest country in the world. The United States right now is the hottest country in the world. And when I was around that table, it was a nice group of people, many of whom I knew from previous. When I saw the passion they had for the country, and almost everyone, and you probably have the tapes, it was very public, but almost every one of them said, thank God for the United States. Without the United States, they couldn't really have NATO. It wouldn't work. It wouldn't work. It will in the future because now they're paying much more money, but it wouldn't work. It was great. And I left here differently. I left here saying that these people really love their countries. It's not a ripoff. And we're here to help them protect their country. Okay, we'll do one or two more.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah. A question on Spain. Are you satisfied with today's...
Oh, I think Spain's terrible what they've done. No, I do. They're the only country that won't pay the full up. They want to stay at 2%. I think it's terrible. And, they're doing very well. The economy is very well. And that economy could be blown right out of the water with something bad happening. Spain is the only country that... Are you from Spain?
Yeah.
Good, congratulations. You're the only country that is not paying. I don't know what the problem is. I think it's too bad. So we'll make it up. You know what we're going to do? We're negotiating with Spain on a trade deal. we're going to make them pay twice as much. And I'm actually serious about that. We're going to make Spain, I like Spain. I have so many people from Spain that it's a great place and they're great people. But Spain is the only country out of all of the countries that refuses to pay. And, you know, so they want a little bit of a free ride. But they'll have to pay it back to us on trade because I'm not going to let that happen. It's unfair. It's unfair to NATO. All right, sir, please. Go ahead, right in the back. Yeah, you, tall one. The tall man.
Mr. President, Johannes Petra from Austrian National Television.
How are you?
You once said that you would end the Ukraine war in 24 hours. You later said you said that sarcastically.
Well, of course it was sarcastic.
But you've now been in office for 5 months and 5 days. Why have you not been able to end the Ukraine war?
Because it's more difficult than people would have any idea. Vladimir Putin has been more difficult. Frankly, I had some problems with Zelensky. You may have read about him. And it's been more difficult than other wars. I mean, look, we just ended a war in 12 days that was simmering for 30 years, frankly. We ended Rwanda and the Congo. They're coming to sign the documents. We've already signed basic documents, but they're coming, I think, to the White House on Friday. We ended Serbia was going to go at it. But maybe the most important of all, India and Pakistan. And that wasn't whether or not they may someday have nukes like we're talking about in the Middle East, like we're talking about with Israel and Iran. This is they have nuclear weapons. I ended that with a series of phone calls on trade. I said, look, if you're going to go fighting each other, it was getting very bad. You know how bad that last attack was. It was really bad. If you're going to go fighting each other, we're not doing any trade deal. No, 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 you have to do a trade deal. I said, we're not doing any trade deal. And in fact, I had the general, who was very impressive. The general from Pakistan was in my office last week. You know, Prime Minister Modi is a great friend of mine. He's a great gentleman. He's a great man. And I got them to reason. I said, we're not doing a trade deal if you're going to fight. And if you're going to fight each other, we're not doing a trade deal. And you know what? He said, no, I want to do the trade deal. We stopped the nuclear war. Go ahead. Go ahead, Jeff. Here's another beauty, Jeff. He's a beauty, all right. Go ahead.
Mr. President, to follow up on Ukraine, will the United States contribute any more money to Ukraine's defense this year to the $5 billion that allies are giving? And one question, you had another meeting with the Dutch opposition leader, Mr. Wilders. Can you tell us about that meeting? And are you upset about his anti-Muslim stance?
I'm not upset about it. It's just his view. He's unhappy with the way things are going in this country and various countries. He was an opposition leader. And I was asked to meet with the opposition leader by the people that are running. I think they have some deal where if you have a meeting, you're supposed to meet with an opposition leader. I said, that's strange. We don't do that. But I met with I didn't know him. He seemed like a very nice guy, but he's in opposition to the current people, and that was set up by the current people. So I assume when I met with the Prime Minister, you're supposed to meet with the opposition. We'll have to try that sometime in our country. Let's not do it. But I thought he was very good. As far as money going, we'll see what happens. There's a lot of spirit. Look, Vladimir Putin really has to end that war. People are dying at levels that people haven't seen before for a long time. Go ahead. Go ahead. White shirt. Oh, she's all excited.
Okay. So, BBC News Ukrainian. I would
Where
like
are you
to
from?
Ask you, I'm from Ukraine.
Oh.
So my question to you is whether or not the U.S. is ready to sell anti-air missile systems Patriot to Ukraine. We know that Russia has been pounding Ukraine really heavily right now.
Are you living yourself now in Ukraine?
My husband is there.
Wow.
And
I can see you it's amazing.
And me with the kids, I'm in Warsaw actually, because he wanted me to be.
Is your husband a soldier? No?
He's
there now?
Yeah.
Wow. That's rough stuff, right? That's tough. And you're living here?
In Warsaw.
And you're a reporter?
I am.
Good. So let me just tell you, they do want to have the anti-missile missiles, okay, as they call them, the Patriots. And we're going to see if we can make some available. You know, they're very hard to get. We need them too. We were supplying them to Israel, and they're very effective, 100% effective. Hard to believe how effective. And they do want that more than any other thing, as you probably know. That's a very good question, and I wish you a lot of luck. I mean, I can see it's very upsetting to you. So say hello to your husband, okay? Thank you. Go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. You were criticizing...
Where are you from?
Bloomberg News.
Oh, Bloomberg. That's wonderful.
You were criticizing the Federal Reserve Chair before coming to this summit.
Yeah, I think he's terrible.
I was wondering if you've begun interviewing different candidates for the Fed pick.
Yeah, I know within 3 or 4 people who I'm going to pick. I mean, he goes out pretty soon, fortunately, because I think he's terrible. We have no inflation. We have a tremendous economy. Hundreds of billions of dollars of tariff money is pouring in. Factories are being built because they don't want to pay the tariffs, so they're building them all over the country. I think we're close to $15 trillion. I told you $5.1 trillion from the Middle East alone, but of investment money coming in. There's never been anything like that in the history of our country. But we have no inflation. And we have borrowing because Biden, stupidly, they did short-term debt. So we have borrowing coming up. And, you know, we'll go 10 years, maybe longer, maybe shorter, but we'll go a long period of time when we do the debt. And because of him, because of this guy, we will have to pay for years. We'll be paying for him. And I said to him, listen, there's no inflation. He says, but maybe there'll be some. That's true. I said, if there is some, what you do is raise the rate. I'm okay with that. You raise the rate in 2 years from now or in a year from now. But because the rate's high, we have to pay more for debt. It's pretty equal. In other words, if it's 4%, it's 4%. If you drop it a point, you'll pay 3%. So it's fairly equal, not necessarily, but fairly equal. So we're going to end up paying maybe 2 points or 3 points more. 3 points would be about $900 billion a year because of this very average mentally person. He's an average mentally person. I'd say low in terms of what he does, low IQ for what he does, okay? Wait, so instead of paying $900 billion, we don't want to pay 900 just because he doesn't want to lower the rate. I said, if there's inflation in 2 years or 3 years or 1 year from now, you raise the rate and you take care of the inflation, among other things. But he's probably a very political guy, I guess. I don't know. I think he's a very stupid person, actually. All right, one more. Let's go. How about you? Go ahead. She looks so happy and everything.
Thank you.
That's why I
I'm
picked
from
her.
Spain too. I'm Ana Buch from La Vanguardia. I wanted to know if
You're where from?
Spain too. I wanted to know if you want to
That's the Spain corner right there. Shouldn't have said that. That's okay. I do like Spain, by the way. I think it's unfair that they're not paying, but go ahead.
Are you going to negotiate directly with Spain about...
I'm going to negotiate directly with Spain. I'm going to do it myself. They're going to pay. They'll pay more money this way. You should tell them to go back and pay. You're a reporter? Tell them to go back. They ought to join all of those countries that are paying 5%. Spain's going to be just about the only one that's not. They were the most hostile toward doing it. It just doesn't make sense to me. Okay. All right, Kelly, go ahead. Here we go. Here's another one.
Hello, sir. Thank you very
We
much.
got them all today.
Okay. So, Mr. President, you talked about expecting some on-the-ground assessments at Fordo and other sites.
Now here-
Is that
here again.
Israeli and U.S.?
It's been obliterated, Kelly. It's been
What is your message then, sir, to the intelligence community when they present reports? You're not disputing the DIA report. You're just
They presented a
exists.
report that wasn't finished. We're talking about something that took place 3 days ago.
I understand that, sir.
The
It's an
report was
initial
done
assessment. So
2
what
days
is
ago.
your-
Wait a minute.
Yes.
They didn't see it. All they can do is take a guess. Now, if you take a look at the pictures, if you take a look how it's all blackened, you know the fire and brimstone is all underground because it's granite and it's all underground. You don't show it. But even there, with all of that being said, the whole area for 75 yards around the hole where it hit is black with fire. The group that's run by this gentleman, in fact, you may want to talk about it for a second because we're going to issue a report. And I think it's not even a very exciting report at this point. it's been obliterated, totally obliterated. And they did a report, but it was like, if you look at the dates, it's just a few days after it
Understood,
happened.
sir.
So they didn't see it. They said it may be very severe.
Understood. Do you have a message for the intelligence community, though, in terms of unvarnished information getting to you, that it's not
I don't really have a message. I would say issue the report when you know what happened. I wouldn't say that it could be severe or maybe not. They use the word severe. It could be severe or maybe it's not.
And
so people like you picked up and said, oh, it's not severe.
We're just looking for
the report was not a complete report. Yeah, the message was probably wait till you know the answer before you.
And sir, did you not have a public component to your Zelensky meeting for a tactical reason with President Putin?
Let him answer this.
Hello, Mr. Secretary.
Yeah. There's a reason the president calls out fake news for what it is. These pilots, these refuelers, these fighters, these air defenders, the skill and the courage it took to go into enemy territory flying 36 hours on behalf of the American people and the world to take out a nuclear program is beyond what anyone in this audience can fathom. And then the instinct of CNN, the instinct of the New York Times is to try to find a way to spin it for their own political reasons to try to hurt President Trump or our country. They don't care what the troops think. They don't care what the world thinks. They want to spin it to try to make him look bad based on a leak. Of course, we've all seen plenty of leakers. And what do leakers do? They have agendas. And what do? Do they share the whole information or just the part that they want to introduce? And when they introduce that preliminary report that's deemed to be a low assessment, you know what a low assessment means? Low confidence in the data in that report. And why is there low confidence? Because all of the evidence of what was just bombed by 12 30,000-pound bombs is buried under a mountain, devastated and obliterated. So if you want to make an assessment of what happened at Fordo, you better get a big shovel and go really deep, because Iran's nuclear program is obliterated. And somebody somewhere is trying to leak something to say, oh, with low confidence, we think maybe it's moderate. Those that dropped the bombs precisely in the right place know exactly what happened when that exploded. And you know who else knows? Iran. That's why they came to the table right away, because their nuclear capabilities have been set back beyond what they thought were possible because of the courage of a commander-in-chief who led our troops, despite what the fake news wants to say.
But you're not disputing the report said what it said, even though it was initial.
The report said what it said, and it was fine. It was severe, they think, but they had no idea. They shouldn't have issued a report until they did. But we've gotten the information. I think Pete said it better than you can say it. And, you know, you should be proud, you, especially you, should be proud of those pilots, and you shouldn't be trying to demean them.
No, there's
those pilots flew at great risk, a big chance that they'd never come back home and see their husbands or their wives. Let me just tell you, you and NBC, fake news, which is one of the worst, and CNN, New York Times, are all bad. They're sick. There's something wrong with them. But you know what? You should be praising those people instead of trying to find some. By getting me, by trying to go and get me, you're hurting those people. They were devastated. You know, I got a call from Missouri, great state, that I won 3 times by a lot. And I got a call that the pilots and the people on the plane were devastated because they were trying to minimize the attack. And they all said it was hit. But we don't think it was really maybe hit that badly. And they were devastated. They put their lives on the line, and then they have, and I'm not referring to you, but real scum come out and write reports that are as negative as they could possibly be. It should be the opposite. You should make them heroes and heroines. You should make them really people that they were so devastated when they heard this news. And you know what they said? One of them, I spoke to one of them, said, "Sir, we hit the site. It was perfect. It was dead on." Because they don't understand fake news, because they have a normal life, except they have to fly very big, very fast planes. But it's a shame. You should be making them heroes. All right, in the back. Go ahead, back, white, yeah. White jacket, yeah. Go ahead, give my mic. Hello.
Deborah Haynes from Sky News. Mark Rutte, the NATO chief, who is your friend, he called you daddy earlier. Do you regard your NATO allies as kind of children?
No, he likes me. I think he likes me. If he doesn't, I'll let you know. I'll come back and I'll hit him hard, okay? No?
He
did it very affectionate. Daddy, you're my daddy.
Do you regard your NATO allies, though, as kind of like children, and they're obviously listening to you and they're spending more, and you're obviously appreciative of that, but do you hope that actually they're going to be able to defend themselves, defend Europe on their own without
I think they need help a little bit at the beginning, and I think they'll be able to, and I think they're going to remember this day. And this is a big day for NATO. You know, this was a very big day. They took it. One of the gentlemen said, you know what? We've been trying to raise money raise the rate for 30 years, he said, 20 years, from almost the beginning. And he's been there for a long time. He said, until you came along, it never happened. What you did is amazing. It's been sort of an amazing day for a lot of reasons, but also for that. Yeah, go ahead.
Do you think they can do it without you, though, in the future? Can they do it without the United States?
I mean, you have to ask Mark, okay? So we're heading back. We're heading back. I want to thank these two gentlemen behind me. They're incredible people, both of them. They've done a fantastic job. And Susie's in the front, and she's done great. And Monica, thank you very much. It was quite an exciting time. And we're going to be heading back. We'll be back soon, and we'll see you in Washington, D.C. Remember this, we have the hottest country anywhere in the world. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
There is President Trump speaking at a NATO summit, flanked by Pete Hegseth and Marco Rubio, Secretaries of Defense and State, respectively. Let's get to Washington, D.C. right now. Bloomberg Washington correspondent Tyler Kendall is standing by. And I guess, you know, we can wade through all the how obliterated is Fordo discussion, because, as Pete Hegseth said, you need a really serious shovel to get down there and get to the important news, which is, I think, the 5% defense spending. These countries in NATO, potentially including Spain, are willing to spend 5% of their GDP on defense equipment. What details do we know about this, Tyler, and where is that money going to go?
Yeah, hey, Matt. Well, this really was the focus of the NATO summit. President Trump did start by speaking about the latest on the U.S. airstrikes on Iran, but then he did pivot to say that he did speak to the leaders about boosting this defense spending, and he really does see this as a win. Now, the pledge here is 5% of GDP. About 3.5% of that would go towards core defense, and 1.5% would go towards other sort of investments such as infrastructure or cybersecurity. But we should say that some of these countries really have come out with some concerns, including Spain, as you heard President Trump single out there, that it is going to take time to boost spending and that they're also withholding to their own voters when it comes to how they are spending their money. He said that he would penalize Spain when it comes to trade for lowering NATO spending, saying that they would pay twice as much in a trade deal. Of course, we would be waiting to see how that would potentially shake out here, considering that Spain is in that member bloc negotiating with the European Union.
He also took a few questions on Ukraine and Russia. One reporter pointing out that at one point he had pledged to end that war within 24 hours of taking office. But he struck a different tone here, saying that Putin needs to end the war in Ukraine. We know that he met with the Ukrainian president at NATO. Just give us the lay of the land there, Tyler.
Right. Well, it was interesting to hear him. The direct quote he said was, when it comes to the war in Ukraine, that is more difficult than other wars. And then he did really put the pressure on Vladimir Putin here to help get to the table to negotiate. And we know that one of the key sticking points, particularly when it comes to Ukraine, but also allies at the NATO summit, is that they really have been urging the U.S. to give some sort of firmer security guarantee if there were to be a negotiated settlement. This White House has repeatedly said that there would be more of an inherent guarantee and that they signed this economic deal that would give the U.S. a more vested interest. But it was interesting to hear the president say that they would look into potentially sending Ukraine another Patriot missile battery, though he has said that they've had to divert those resources to other regions, including when it comes to Israel. So that's something that we're going to be watching really closely here, because while President Trump did say that he had a good meeting with the Ukrainian president on the sidelines of the NATO summit, we really haven't seen any sort of details that have emerged when it comes to what the U.S. would be willing to commit in terms of a broader security guarantee that Ukraine is looking for.
What is the talk, Tyler, right now in Washington, D.C.? I mean, as the president spends time at a NATO summit in The Hague, as you know, the media focuses in on the U.S. bombing of Iran as Ukraine continues to defend itself against Russia. It seems like all of the attention is overseas, and we're not talking as much about that one big, beautiful bill.
Well, that's definitely part of it, Matt, although this White House would contend that they are still on track when it comes to the reconciliation process. But perhaps that has taken a backseat in the headlines since at this point, there aren't enough votes to get that package through the Senate. So really in the backdrop here, there has been ongoing negotiations, except for that some of these big sticking points are the same ones that we have been discussing at this point for months. That includes lifting the SALT cap. We still don't have a compromise there. But then also you have the same sort of factions that we've repeatedly seen here in Washington come forward, including a group of Republicans pitching themselves as fiscal hawks that want to see deeper spending cuts in this plan compared to those Republicans that are raising concerns about changes to Medicaid. We could get into all the wonky details there, but there is still a lot that remains on the table. But the one thing is for sure, this White House wants to see that bill get done by July 4th, so then they can pivot to that July 9th deadline to try to get some trade deals underway as well, too.
Well, let's go exactly there to that July 9th deadline. Again, we heard a lot about Spain in this press conference. We've been talking a little bit about the EU. I mean, where do we stand? It just feels like we're negotiating with so many different countries right now. And July 9th, it's less than 3 weeks away. It's really coming up.
Well, it does appear that the messaging out of this White House is that they want the reconciliation package done first, and then they can sort of start to pivot their attention back to making progress on these trade deals. We had previously heard from the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent. I was at one of his hearings on Capitol Hill earlier this month, where he did say it would be highly likely that we could see that July 9th deadline pushed back. The question then becomes which countries would that ultimately apply to, since he said that they would need to see some sort of substantial movement forward in order to grant that extension. And we had spoken about earlier on this program that the European Union is already preparing its retaliatory measures if they aren't able to make significant progress there. I would also point you to an interesting thread that we've seen emerge here, which is that our initial understanding when all of these tariffs came into play was that the sector-specific tariffs, those tariffs enacted under Section 232 on national security concerns, would not be part of any of the negotiations that we're seeing for the so-called reciprocal tariffs. But we really have started to see those make their way into these negotiations. We saw it on steel in the United Kingdom. But when we look at some of these outstanding negotiations, particularly with the European Union, but also with Japan, for example, we can say that we're seeing auto tariffs start to come into the conversation. So these are very complex, of course, it goes without saying, and difficult negotiations. And at the point, we haven't really gotten much indication from this White House that any are imminent, though if you ask officials, they would say that they are coming soon.
All right, Tyler, thanks very much. Tyler Kendall there with the view from Washington, D.C. Let's get back now to The Hague in the Netherlands to talk to Anne-Marie Horder. She was at the NATO Summit, is at the NATO Summit, but was at the press conference and was able to ask the president a couple of questions. I think it's interesting, Anne-Marie, that the president said he doesn't need Iran to sign a document. He and Marco Rubio were talking about the potential of maybe drafting an agreement for the Iranians to sign. But that he is going, or the U.S. is going to talk to Iran next week.
Well, he said we, yes, and it wasn't exactly clear who he'd be sending. This would likely be Steve Witkoff, his envoy, who's already held a number of meetings with the Iranians. They were supposed to have their 6th meeting, but of course that got canceled after the fact that you had the Israeli strikes on Iran. So it would likely be him, potentially even J.D. Vance, the vice president, was floated to handle these talks, and they've been happening in Oman. So the president says that they're meeting next week. That would be quite the feat, given the fact that the United States sent bunker buster bombs to 3 of their nuclear sites, Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan. But the president seemed to think that maybe a document, the sense I got, was not necessary because he feels as they obliterated those sites. Of course, all of this has come into question, has really overshadowed the president's trip here to The Hague, following those reports from CNN and the New York Times that the nuclear program in Iran was only set back months following these strikes. The president says that this is just too preliminary of data. And in the intelligence world, when you say something is preliminary, it means that it's low confidence. He said this only just happened and we don't have all the data just yet. But it is interesting that the president is still looking for that diplomatic off-ramp when it comes to Iran, and that he's willing to sit down with the Iranians. I got to ask him about what was going on in terms of maximum pressure, which is his policy from his first administration and this administration. We have seen more sanctions on Iranian crude, but just yesterday he said China can continue purchasing crude. Well, China's the only one that really are purchasing crude and keeping the Iranian economy in that sense afloat. And the president said he's not stopping his maximum pressure policy, but he did say that China could continue buying crude from the United States or anyone else they'd like.
Yeah, specifically, he said to you, China's going to buy oil, and they can buy it from us. They can buy it from other people. So appreciate you getting that question in there. At the same time that President Trump was speaking, we also had Fed Chair Jerome Powell in front of the Senate, and he had some words about Jerome Powell, insulting him a little bit, also saying that when it comes to the next Fed chair, that he knows of 3 or 4 people that he'll pick. He also recounted telling Jerome Powell to lower interest rates. So also keeping up that pressure campaign on the Fed as well, Anne-Marie.
Absolutely. And this question came from our colleague Stephanie Lau, talking about the fact that the president the other day, 1 o'clock in the morning, before he departed the White House to come to The Hague for the NATO meeting, was lambasting Jay Powell, who was about to have his testimony in front of the House. So the president has made it very clear he has interest rates on his mind and wants to see them lowered. What was so interesting about his answer was that he said that he already has 3 or 4 people in mind. He wouldn't name names, but he has 3 or 4 people in mind who could replace the Fed chair when his term is up at the start of next year. I spoke to Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent about this a few months ago, and he said that, of course, they have a list and names are in mind, but they will start interviews in the fall. So potentially, before the end of the year, we will have a good idea of who President Trump plans to nominate as the next Fed chair when Jay Powell is up. And clearly, the president does not see eye to eye with the Fed chair. The president today remarked once again that there is, quote, no inflation. I think he's looking at the fact that we had the last 4 CPI prints coming in surprisingly low when it comes to inflation. But he said that what Jay Powell said to him is, but what if? What if we can see inflation? And obviously, the market has been debating the tremendous amount of uncertainty regarding the tax bill, the one big beautiful bill that's being debated right now in Congress, and of course the president's trade and tariff policy.
Yeah, speaking of that tariff policy, I know we don't expect an agreement with the EU from this summit. I mean, all the players are there, so it seems like it would make sense, Anne-Marie. But the president has given them until July 9th to make a deal, so he still has a couple of weeks left. If he leaves just the baseline tariffs in place, just the 10% tariffs in place against the EU, they still want to put retaliatory tariffs on the U.S. Is that correct?
That's accurate, and that's our latest reporting that the European Union is prepared to retaliate against a 10% baseline going after American name brands. American champions like Boeing. What was interesting in this press conference is, of course, Spain is part of the European Union, but the president is irked by Spain's behavior at NATO in the sense that they did not want to sign up for the 5% pledge of defense spending towards GDP. And he said he's going to make it up with them in trade deals. But then that would be a bilateral trade deal between Madrid and Washington, when obviously the European Union is negotiating with the United States on behalf of all their members.
Yeah, interesting conundrum there. Anne-Marie Horton, thanks very much for your reporting. Anne-Marie reporting to us live out of The Hague, where she just sat with President Trump at that press conference and continues to cover the NATO summit for us. You are looking at pictures right now of Senator Van Hollen questioning Fed Chair Jerome Powell. He is testifying before the Senate Banking Committee after testifying to the House yesterday. Let's listen in.
Negatively impact borrowers' ability to fully participate in our economy, and that it can weigh down on the economy overall. Is that still your view?
Yes, it is.
And could you just share your assessment, just from a factual perspective, about how this problem seems to be growing at this point in time, and what would happen if we allow all of these borrowers to default?
So the point I was making, I try hard not to comment on things that aren't Fed policy, but I broke that rule in this case many years ago, so I'll just say what I said then, which is, you can make all kinds of investments and you can discharge if you can't pay back the loan, you can discharge it in bankruptcy. The one exception we make is student loans, and I ask whether that is wise national policy. People borrow to invest in their education.